Alright, welcome back to Fraggoth Reads. Sorry about the late start. Distractions abound. I'm going to have to keep it short today, and I apologize for that. So today we are starting a new literary endeavor with Cyteen, originally published, I believe, in 3 separate volumes. The edition I have is, I think, from 95, when they got collected all in one volume. Featured here will be, the majority of the art here is by Don Maitz. Maitz? M-A-I-T-Z, Maitz. And you too can in fact own a clean oil print version of the cover of the first volume of Cyteen that he did the cover art for the low price of $6,000. If I had that kind of cash just lying around, I would consider it. The stupid sexy guy we'll get introduced to later. That image is the shirtless dude lying back with a come hither glint in his eye is a collaborative effort between CJ Cherryh, that picture anyway, between CJ Cherryh and oh geez, one of her homegirls, one of the people she hangs out with, whose name eludes me at the moment, Jane Fancher. I believe Jane Fancher is the one who did the artwork on that. They've collaborated before to do like illustrations of characters in various of CJ Cherryh's books, and I believe Jane Fancher is also an author herself. I don't think I've read anything by her that I know of. Anyway, to get down to the down and dirties, so Cyteen is taking place. Don't do this. Yay. If it's not one thing, it's another. Anyway, to resume, Cyteen takes place. Cyteen, first of all, is a place, not merely a title. It's kind of the capital planet, for lack of a better term, of Union, of the Alliance Union universe. The Alliance being the Merchanter Alliance, and Union being Union. We're going to learn about Union's backstory right up front. This will be pretty informative. So this takes place some years after the events of Down Below Station, which is kind of, again, the central, kind of the one of the big hinge points of the setting. Probably the big hinge point of the setting, to be honest. The big one. Everything else kind of leads up to or springs off from that, or is not affected by it at all, because it's so removed in space or time. At least for books in the setting. Let's see. Other things I can talk about. That's a good question. So we're going to be introduced to a number of characters. This is very much a tale of politics, paranoia, other things, and long chapters. Chapters are very long in this book, for the most part. I don't even know where Chapter 2 ends, to be honest. We're not going to be getting to Chapter 2 today. I've got to make this one kind of short, so we'll end at Chapter 1. We'll see how far we get. Between most chapters will be a kind of a lore dump, a document. So we will read those as well, obviously. My edition has a map. I'm trying to find a digital ebook version that also has a map, and I have not yet succeeded. Suffice it to say, it shows a picture of the Cyteen globe, I'm not going to try and describe it to you. I will look harder. And, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's also a book about cloning. In so many different ways is it a book about cloning. I had some other salient point I wanted to drop, but I can't remember what it was, so it must not have been that important. So with that, I guess we'll get rockin' and a-rollin'. Enjoy the cover art, and enjoy the tale. There's a lot going on here. Cyteen by CJ Cherryh. Verbal text from The Humane Revolution, The Company Wars, Number 1. Rezun Educational Publications, 4668-1368-1, approved for 80+. Imagine all the variety of the human species confined to a single world, a world sown with the petrified bones of human ancestors, a planet dotted with the ruins of 10,000 years of forgotten human civilizations, a planet on which at the time human beings first flew in space, humans still hunted a surplus of animals, gathered wild plants, farmed with ancient methods, spun natural yarns by hand, and cooked over wood fires. Earth owed allegiance to a multitude of chairmen, councillors, kings, ministers, and presidents, to parliaments and congresses and committees, to republics, democracies, oligarchies, theocracies, monarchies, hegemonies, and political parties which had evolved in profusion for thousands of years. This was the world which first sent out the star probes. Sol Station existed, a much more primitive Sol Station, but altogether self-sustaining, and, favored with a system of tax remission in return for scientific benefit, it launched a number of ambitious projects, including the first large-engine star probe, and ultimately the first crewed pusher ship cluster toward the near stars. The first of the pusher modules was, of course, the venerable Gaia, which was to deliver the Alpha Station component at the star known at that time as Barnard's, and leave 30 volunteer scientists and technicians in what in those days meant inconceivable isolation. They would build their station out of the star's expected system clutter of rock and ice, perform scientific research, and maintain long-distance communication with Earth. The first concept had been disposable pushers, hardly more than robotic star probes, but human passengers mandated an abort and return capacity which, considering all the possibilities for disaster, was negotiated finally to mean a full return capacity. That led to the notion of a crewed pusher module to stay at Barnard's should the star prove impossibly deficient in raw materials necessary for self-sufficiency of the Alpha module, in which event Gaia might remain for a number of years, then strip the station to the essential core and return the mission to Earth. If the star proved a viable home for the station, Gaia would remain only a year or so until the Alpha Station module was fully functioning and stable in its orbit. Then it would return to Sol with its tiny complement of crew and surrender the Gaia module to a second mission, which would, after refitting, go out again with such supplies as trace minerals and materials which the infant station might not have available.
Equally important with the supplies, those early pioneers theorized, was the human link, the reassurance of face-to-face contact with other human beings across what in those days was an inconceivably lonely expanse of space. Earth, with years advance warning via the constant data flow from Gaia and Alpha Station that the mission was abundantly successful and that Gaia was returning, trained a replacement crew and dutifully prepared the return mission. But the crew of Gaia, subject to relativistic effects, running into an information stream indicating greater and greater changes in the Earth they had left, had become more at home in the ship than in the mainstream of a Terran culture gone very alien to them. Their sojourn on Sol Station was intensely unhappy, and they reoccupied Gaia by a surprise move which immensely disconcerted station authorities, but which finally won them their ship and relegated the replacement crew to waiting on the next pusher craft. Other crews of further missions reached the same decision, regarding themselves as permanent voyagers. They considered their small ships as home, had children aboard, and as star stations and attendant pushers multiplied, asked of Earth and the stations only fuel, provisions, and the improvement of their ships with larger compartments, more advanced propulsion, whatever had become available since their last docking. Star stations at half a dozen stars linked themselves by the regular passage of such ships. But in the isolation of those days, in which messages traveled at mere light speed and ships traveled slower still, every station was at least 4 or 5 years time-lagged from every other human habitation, be it ship or station, and learned to exist in these strangely fluxing time referents which were impossibly alien to the general population of Earth. The discovery of intelligent life on the planet at Pell's star, the star Earth once called Tau Ceti, was more than 10 years old by the time word of it reached Earth. The dealing of human beings with the Downers was more than 2 decades advanced by the time Earth's elaborate instructions could arrive at Pell, and it was much longer before Terran scientists could reach Pell up the long route that led them down station by station. And it was much longer before Terran scientists could reach Pell up the long route that led them station by station into a human culture almost as foreign to them as were the Downers. It is difficult from our viewpoint to imagine the Earth of that time. It was virtually impossible As it is difficult from our viewpoint to imagine Earth of that time, it was virtually impossible for Earth to comprehend the reasoning of spacers who refused to leave their ships and who, in their turn, found the, to them, teeming corridors of Sol Station chaotic and terrifying. It was virtually impossible even for Sol Station to understand the life of their contemporaries in the deep beyond, contemporaries whose culture was built on history and experiences and legendary that had much more to do with the hardships of life in remote stations and famous ships than with events in a green and chaotic world they saw only in pictures. Earth, beset with overpopulation and political crises largely attributable to its ancient rivalries, had nevertheless flourished while it was the focus of human development. The unexpected rush of stationers to new construction at Pell, following the prospect of abundant biostuffs, a native population primitive and friendly, and exploitable free-orbiting resources, became a panic flood. Stations between Earth and Pell shut down, disrupting the trade of the Great Circle and creating economic chaos on Earth and Sol Station. Earth reacted by attempting to regulate, across a 10-year time lag. Terran politicians could not readily conceive of the economic strength the remaining stations might achieve, given the unification of population that rush to Pell had created. The concentration of population and the discovery of vast resources combined with the psychological impetus to exploration meant that Earth's now 20-year-old instructions arrived in a situation in such rapid flux, even a month's lag would have been significant. Earth found itself increasingly isolate. subject to internal pressures from a faltering trade system, and in a desperate and ill-advised action imposed a punitive tariff which led to smuggling and an active black market, which in turn led to a sudden fall-off of trade. Earth's response was the declaration of most favored status for certain ships, which in turn led to armed hostilities between ships from Earth and ships which had not been built by Earth and which did not hold any allegiance to its convolute and wildly varying politics. Convolute, and let's try that sentence again. Earth's response was the declaration of most favored status for certain ships, which in turn led to armed hostilities between ships from Earth and ships which had not been built on Earth, and which did not hold any allegiance to its convolute and wildly varying politics. Further, Earth, convinced that emigration of scientists and engineers from Sol System was feeding the spacer cultures with the best and brightest and robbing Earth of its best talent, slammed down an emigration ban not only on travel from Earth and Sol Station, but on further moves of citizens in certain professions from station to station. Gaia made her last trip to Earth in 2125 and left, vowing never to return. A general wave of rebellion and mutiny swept through the stars. Stations were mothballed and deserted. Probes and missions sought further stars not only with economic motive now, but because there were more and more people anxious to move outward, seeking political freedom before restrictions came down. Viking Station and Mariner sprang into existence as stationers found even Pell too vulnerable to Earth's influence, and as Pell's now established economy afforded less opportunity for highly profitable initial phase investment. By 2201, a group of dissident scientists and engineers sponsored by financial interests on Mariner founded a station at Cyteen, about a world vastly different from Pell. The brilliant work of one of those scientists, combined with the economic power of Cyteen's new industries, sent the first faster-than-light probe out from Cyteen in 2234, an event which altered the time scale of spaceflight and forever changed the nature of trade and politics. Cyteen's early years were characterized not only by a burst of growth and invention unparalleled in human history, but, ironically, by the resurrection of long-disused technologies out of ship archives. Combustion engines, gravity-dependent processing, all to save soft landing the enormous mass requirements of a full-scale terrestrial development. In addition, there were new on-planet technologies specific to Cyteen to create pockets of breathable atmosphere in the otherwise deadly environment. All this effort because Cyteen represented a major biological opportunity for the human species. It had no intelligent indigenes. It did have a varied and entirely alien ecosystem, virtually two ecosystems, in fact, because of the extreme isolation of its two continents, differing significantly from each other but vastly different from Earth and Pell. It was a biologist's paradise, and it offered, by its absence of intelligent life, the first new cradle of terrestrial human civilization since Earth itself. It was not politics alone which led to the company wars. It was the sudden acceleration of trade and population mobility. It was the stubborn application of outmoded policies by Terran agencies out of touch with the governed, and finally, it was the loyalty of a handful of specially favored Terran merchanter captains attempting to maintain a fading trade empire for a mother world which had become only peripheral to human space. It was a doomed effort. Cyteen, no longer alone in the beyond, but Motherworld itself to Esperance, Pan-Paris, and Fargon stations, could be Pan-Paris, declared its independence from the Earth Company in 2300, an action which, reported now with the speed of the faster-than-lights, prompted Earth to build and dispatch armed FTLs to bring the dissident stations back into line. Merchanters quickly fled the routes nearer Pell, thus reducing the availability of supplies, while Earth itself, even with FTL technology, was by no means able to supply the mass requirement of its fleet over such distances. Over a span of years, the Earth Company fleet degenerated to acts of piracy and coercion which completely alienated the merchanters, always the Earth Company's mistake. The formation of the Merchanters' Alliance at Pell established a second mercantile power in the Beyond and put an end to Earth's attempt to dictate its scattered colonies. Surely one of the more ironical outcomes of the war, the Treaty of Pell and the resulting economic linkages of the three human societies, drawing on three vastly different ecosystems, now exist as the driving forces in a new economic structure which transcends all politics and systems. Trade and common interests have proven, in the end, more powerful in human affairs than all the warships ever launched. Chapter 1. 1. It was from the air that the rawness of the land showed most. Vast tracts where humanity had as yet made no difference, deserts unclaimed, stark as moons, scrag and woolwood thickets unexplored except by orbiting radar. Ariane Emery gazed down at it from the window. She kept to the passenger compartment now. Her eyesight, she had to admit it, was no longer sharp enough, her reflexes no longer fast enough for the jet. She could go up front, bump the pilot out of the chair, and take the controls. It was her plane, her pilot, and a wide sky. Sometimes she did. But it was not the same. Only the land was, still most of the land was. And when she looked out the window, it might have been a century ago, when humankind had been established on Cyteen less than 100 years, when union was unthought of, the war only a rumbling discontent, and the land looked exactly like this everywhere. 200 years ago, the first colonists had come to this unlikely star, made the beginnings of the station, and come down to the world. 40-odd years later, the sublight ships were coming in, few and forlorn, to try to convert their structure and their operations to faster than light, and time sped up, time hurtled at translight speeds. Change came so fast that sublight ships met ships they took for alien, but they were not. It was worse news for them. They were human. And the game was all changed. The starships went out like seeds from a pod. The genetics labs upriver at Rezun bred humanity as fast as it could turn them out from the womb tanks, and every generation bred others and worked in labs breeding more and more, till there were people enough, her uncle had said, to fill the empty places, colonize the world, build more star stations. Esperance. Fargon. Every place with its own labs and its own means to breed and grow. Earth had tried to call her ships back. It was all too late. Earth had tried to tax and rule its colonies with a hard hand. That was very much too late. Ariane Emery remembered the secession, the day that Cyteen declared itself and its own colonies independent, the day the Union began, and they were all suddenly rebels against the distant mother world. She had been 17 when the word came down from station. We are at war. Rezun bred soldiers, then, grim and single-minded and intelligent, oh yes, bred and refined and honed, knowing by touch and reflex what they had never seen in their lives, knowing above all what their purpose was. Living weapons, thinking and calculating down one track. She had helped design those patterns. 45 years after the secession, the war was still going on, sometimes clandestine, sometimes so remote in space it seemed a fact of history, except at Rezun. Other facilities could breed the soldiers and the workers once Rezun had set the patterns, but only Rezun had the research facilities, and it had fought the war in its own dark ways under Ariane Emery's directorate. 54 years of her life had seen the company wars over, humanity divided, borders drawn. The Earth Company fleet had held Pel's star, but the merchanters of the newly formed alliance had taken Pel and declared it their base. Saul had tried to ignore its humiliating defeat and go off in another direction. The remnant of the old company fleet had turned to piracy and still raided merchanters, no different than they had ever done, while Alliance and Union alike hunted them. It was only hiatus. The war was cold again. It went on at conference tables where negotiators tried to draw lines biology did not, and make borders in boundless, three-dimensional space, to keep a peace that had never, in all Ariane Emery's life, existed. All of that might not have been yet. It might have been 100 years ago, except that the plane was sleek and fine, not the patch-together that had run cargo between Novgorod and Rezun. In those days, everyone had sat on bales of plastics and containers of seed and whatever else was making the trip. Then she had begged to sit by the dusty windows, and her mother had said to put her sunscreen on, even so. Now she sat in a leather seat with a drink at her elbow, in a jet snugly warm inside, immaculately maintained, with a handful of aides talking business and going over their notes, a noise just barely enough to get past the engines. No traveling nowadays without a clutter of aides and bodyguards. Catelyn and Florian were back there, quiet as they were trained to be, watching her back, even here, at 10,000 meters and among Rezun's staff whose briefcases were full of classified material. Much, much different from the old days. "Mama, can I sit by the window?" That is spelled Maman, M-A-M-A-N. She was anomalous, child of two parents, Olga Emery and James Carnath. They had founded the labs at Rezun, had begun the process that had shaped Union itself. They had sent out the colonists, the soldiers. Their own genes had gone into hundreds of them. Her quasi-relatives were scattered across light years. But so were everyone's these days. In her lifetime, even that basic human thinking had changed. Biological parentage was a trivial connection. Family mattered. The larger, the more extended, the safer and more prosperous. Rezun was her inheritance. Hence this jet, not a commercial airliner. No hired plane either, and no military jet. A woman in her position could call on all these things, and still preferred mechanics who were part of the household, a pilot whose psych patterns she was sure of, bodyguards who were the best of Rezun's designs. The thought of a city, the subways, life among the clerks and techs and cooks and laborers who jostled one another and hurried about their schedules to earn credit, was as frightening to her as airless space. She directed the course of worlds and colonies. The thought of trying to buy a meal in a restaurant, of fighting crowds to board a subway, of simply being on a topside street where traffic roared and people were in motion on all sides, filled her with an irrational panic. She did not know how to live outside Rezun. She knew how to arrange a plane, check out the flight plans, order her luggage, her aides, her security, every little detail, and found a public airport an ordeal. A serious flaw, granted. But everyone was due a phobia or two, and these things were far from the center of her worries. It was not likely that Ariane Emery would ever face a Novgorod subway or a station's open dock. It was a long, long while before she saw the river and the first plantation. A thin ribbon of road, finally the domes and towers of Novgorod, a sudden, remarkably sudden metropolis. Oh, no, that's how it's read. A sudden, remarkably sudden metropolis. Under the jet's wings, the plantations widened, the towers of electronic screens and precipitators shadowed the fields, and traffic crawled along the roads at ground-bound pace. Barges chained down the Volga toward the sea. Barges and pushers lined the river dockage past the plantations. There was still a lot of the raw and industrial about Novgorod, for all the glitter of the new. This side of it had not changed in 100 years, except to grow bigger, the barges and the traffic becoming ordinary instead of a rare and wonderful treat. "Look, Mama, there's a truck." The blue of the woolwood thicket blurred by under the wing. Pavement and the end stripes of the runway flashed past. The tires touched smoothly, and the jet came rolling to a stop for a left turn down toward the terminal. A little panic touched Ariane Emery at this stage, despite the knowledge that she would never get to the crowded hallways. There were cars waiting. Her own crew would handle the baggage, secure the jet, do all these things. It was only the edge of the city, and the car windows would permit vision out, but none in. All those strangers, all that motion, random and chaotic. In the distance, she loved it. It was her own creation. She knew its mass motions, if not its individual ones. At a distance, in the aggregate, she trusted it. At close range, it made her hands sweat. Oh, thanks to everyone who's tuning in. Kemi Fox loves Cyteen's intro! Me too. Cam Clark Gaming says, "Hello, buddy. Thank you for your great work. He's almost done. They are almost done. Halfway through Rise of Endymion. Thank you so much for your reading." Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Cars pulling up and a flurry of hurrying guards in the security entrance of the Hall of State said that it was no mere senatorial arrival. Mikhail Korain, on the balcony outside the council chamber, flanked by his own bodyguards and aides, paused and looked down the echoing stone lower floor, with its fountain, its brass railings on the grand stairway, its multiple star emblem in gold on the gray stone wall. Imperial splendor for imperial ambitions. And the chief architect for those ambitions made her entrance. The counselor from Rezun, in company with the Secretary of Science. Ariane Carnath Emery with her entourage, late, dependably late, because the counselor was damned confident of her majority, and only deigned to visit the hall because the counselor had to vote in person. Mikhail Korain glared and felt that speeding of his heart that his doctors had told him to avoid. "Calm down," they were wont to say. "Some things are beyond your control." Meaning, one supposed, the counselor from Rezun. Cyteen, by far the most populous of the entities in the Union, had consistently managed to capture 2 seats in the executive, in the Council of 9. It was logical that one of them was the Bureau of Citizens, which meant labor and farming and small business. It was not logical that the electors in the sciences, far and wide across the light years Union reached, with a dozen eminently qualified potential candidates, persisted in returning Ariane Emery to the halls of government. More than that, to a position which she had held for 50 years. 50 damned years, during which she had bribed and browbeaten interests on Cyteen and every station in Union, and, rumored but never proved, in Alliance and Sol as well. You wanted something done? You asked someone who could get the Counselor of Science to arrange it. What were you willing to pay? What would you take in trade? And the damned science electorate, made up of supposed intellects, kept voting her in, no matter what the scandals that attached to her, no matter that she virtually owned Rezun Labs, which was legally equal to a planet in Union's government, which did things within its walls that countless investigations had tried, and failed on technicalities, to prove. Money was not the answer. Korain had money. It was Ariane Emery herself. It was the fact that most of the population of Cyteen, most of the population of Union itself, had come in one way or another from Rezun, and those who did not used tapes. that Rezun devised. Which that woman devised. To doubt the integrity of the tapes was paranoid. Oh, there were a few who refused to use them, and studied higher math and business without them, and never took a pill, and never lay down to dream what the masses clear across Union dreamed, knowledge pouring into their heads as much as they could absorb there in a few sessions. Drama, experienced as well as seen, at carefully chosen intensity. Skills, acquired at a bone and nerve level. You used the tapes because your competition would, because you had to excel to get along in the world, because it was the only way to know things fast enough, high enough, wide enough, and the world changed and changed and changed in any human lifespan. The Bureau of Information vetted those tapes. Experts reviewed them. There was no way any subliminals could get past them. Mikhail Korain was not one of the lunatic fringe who suspected government comm-tapping, alliance poisoning of cargoes, or mind-enslaving subliminals in the entertainment tapes. That sort of purist could refuse rejuve, die old at 75, and live off public works jobs because they were self-taught know-nothings. But damn it, that woman kept getting elected, and he could not understand it. There she was, getting a little stoop to the shoulders, allowing a little streak of gray to show in the black hair, when anyone who could count knew she was older than Union, on rejuve and silver-haired under the dye. Aides swarmed round her. Cameras focused on her as if there was no other center to the universe. Damn bony bitch. You wanted a human being designed like a prize pig, you asked Rezun. You wanted soldiers, you wanted workers, you wanted strong backs and weak minds, or a perfect, guaranteed genius, you asked Rezun. And senators and councilors alike came to bow and scrape and mouth politeness. Good God, someone had brought her flowers. Mikhail Korain turned away in disgust, plowed himself away through his aides. 20 years he had been sitting as the head of the minority party in the Nine, 20 years of swimming against the tide, gaining a little now and again, losing all the big ones, the way they had lost the latest. Stanislav Vogel of the trade electorate had died, and with the alliance violating the treaty as fast as they could arm their merchant ships, the centrists ought to have been able to carry that seat. But no. The trade electorate elected Ludmila DeFranco, Vogel's niece. Moderate hell, DeFranco was only steering a careful course. She was no less an expansionist than her uncle. Something had changed hands. Someone had been bought. Someone had tilted Andrus Company toward DeFranco, and the centrists had lost their chance to install a fifth member in the Nine and gain the majority of the executive for the first time in history. It was a crushing disappointment. And there, in the hall downstairs, in the middle of the sycophants and all the bright young legislators, was the one who had pulled the strings money could not pull. Political favor, then. The unprovable, untraceable commodity. On that, the fate of the Union hinged. He entertained the most terrible fantasy, not for the first time, that somehow, on the steps outside, some lunatic might run up with a gun or a knife and solve their problem at one stroke. He felt a profound disturbance at that thought. But it would reshape the Union. It would give humankind a chance, before it was everlastingly too late. One life weighed very little in those scales. He drew deep breaths. He walked into the council chambers and made polite conversation with the few who came to commiserate with the losers. He gritted his teeth and walked over to pay his polite congratulations to Bogdanovich, who, holding the seat of the Bureau of State, chaired the council. Bogdanovich kept his face absolutely bland, his kindly, white-browed eyes the image of everyone's grandfather, full of gentility and civility. Not a trace of triumph. If he had been that good when he negotiated the alliance settlement, Union would own the codes to Pell. Bogdanovich was always better at petty politics. And he was another one who lasted. And he was another one who lasted. His electorate was all professional, the consuls, the appointees, immigration, the station administrators, a minuscule number of people to elect an office which had started out as far less important than it had turned out to be. God, how had the framers of the Constitution let themselves play creative games with the political system? The New Model, they had called it, a government shaped by an informed electorate. And they had thrown 10,000 years of human experience out the hatch, a damned bunch of social theorists, including Olga Emery and James Carnath back in the days when Cyteen had 5 seats of the 9 and most of the Council of Worlds. "Tough one, Mikhail," Bogdanovich said, shaking his hand and patting it. "Well, will of the electorate," Corain said. "Can't quarrel with that." He smiled with absolute control. "We did get the highest percentage yet." "Someday, you old pirate, someday I'll have the majority. And you'll live to see it." "Will of the electors," Bogdanovich said, still smiling, and Corain smiled till his teeth ached, then turned from Bogdanovich to Jenner Harogo, another of that breed, holding the powerful internal affairs seat, and Catherine Lau, who held the Bureau of Information, which vetted all the tapes. Of course. Emery came sailing in, and they left him in mid-sentence to go and join her claque. It is spelled with an A. Maybe that's different than a clique? A clique? Corain exchanged a pained look with Industry, Nguyen Tien of Viking, and Finance, Mahmoud Chavez of Voyager Station, centrists both. Their 4th seat, Admiral Leonid Gorodin, was over in a grim confluence of his own uniformed aides. Defense was, ironically, the least reliable, the most prone to reassess his position and shift into the expansionist camp if he conceived near-term reasons. That was Gorodin, centrist only because he wanted the new Excelsior-class military transports kept in near space where he could use them, not, as he put it, out on our backside while Alliance pulls another damned embargo. You want your electorates hammering at your doors for supplies, you want another hot war, citizens. Let's just send those carriers out to the far beyond and leave us depending on Alliance merchanters. Not saying, of course, that the Treaty of Pell, which had agreed that the Merchanters' Alliance would haul cargo and build no warships, and that Union, which had built a good many of those haulers, would maintain its fleet, but build no ships to compete with the Merchanters, was a diplomatic buy-off, a ransom to get supply flowing again. Bogdanovich had brought that home, and even Emery had voted against it. The stations had passed it. The full General Council had to vote on it, and it got through by a hair's breadth. Union was tired of war, that was all, tired of disrupted trade, scarce supplies. Now Emery wanted to launch another wave of exploration and colonization out into the deep beyond. Everyone knew there was trouble out there to find. What Saul had run into on the other side of space proved that well enough. It had brought Saul running back to the Alliance, begging for trade, begging for markets. Saul had neighbors, and its reckless poking about was likely to bring trouble in the Alliance's back door and right to Union space. Gorodin hammered on that point constantly, and demanded a larger share of the budget for defense. Gorodin's position was weakest. He was vulnerable to a vote of confidence. They could lose him if he failed to get the ships the fleet wanted in the zones that mattered. And the news from the trade electorate was a blow, a severe one. The centrists had thought they had won this one. They had truly thought they had a chance of stopping Emery, and all they could do now was force a point of order, persuade the council that no vote ought to be taken on the Hope project, since it involved ship appropriations and a major budget priority decision, until DeFranco could get in from Esperance and assume her seat. Or they could break the quorum and send it to a vote in the Council of Worlds. Emery's cabal would flinch at that. The representatives were far more independent, especially Cyteen's large bloc, who were mostly centrist. Let them get their teeth into a bill of this complexity not already hammered out by the Nine, and they would be at it for months, sending up changes the Nine would veto, and round again. Let Gorodin have another try at persuading the expansionists to delay the vote. Gorodin was the one on the fence, the one with the medals, the war hero. Throw him at them, see if he could swing them. If not, the centrists would walk, all 4 of them. It had political cost, profound cost, to break the quorum and close the meeting. But time was what they needed, time to get to key lobbyists, time to see if they could pull a full strings, and see if DeFranco, when she arrived, could be persuaded to be the moderate she proclaimed herself, or at least tilt to the centrist side on a bill that critical to her constituency. She might vote to table. Councilors drifted toward their seats. Emery's group came up last, predictably. Bogdanovich rapped with the antique gavel. "Council is in session," Bogdanovich said, and proceeded to the election results. I can't flip pages good. And proceeded to the election results and the official confirmation of Ludmilla DeFranco as councillor for the Bureau of Trade. Moved and seconded Catherine Lau and Jenner Harogo. Emery sat expressionless. She never made routine motions. The bored look on her face, the slow revolutions of the stylus in her long-nailed fingers, proclaimed a studied patience with the forms. No discussion. A polite pro forma round of ayes officially recorded. "Next item of business," Bogdanovich said, "acceptance of Denzil Lal, voting proxy for Sarah DeFranco until her arrival." Same routine. Another bored round of ayes, a little banter between Harogo and Lau, small laughter. From Gorodin, Chavez, Tien, no reaction. Emery noticed that. Corain saw her laugh shortly and take in that silence with a sidelong glance. The stylus stopped in its revolutions. Emery's glance was wary now, sharp as she glanced Corain's way and gave a slow, slight smile, the kind that might mitigate an accidental meeting of eyes. But the eyes were not smiling at all. "What will you do?" they wondered. "What are you up to, Corain?" There were not that many guesses, and a mind of Emery's caliber would take very little time to come up with them. The stare lingered, comprehended, threatened like a blade in fence. He hated her. He hated everything she stood for. But, God, dealing with her was like an experience in telepathy. He stared flatly, returning the threat, quirked a brow that said, "You can push me to the brink. I'll carry you over it. Yes, I will do it. Fracture the council. Paralyze the government." The half-lidding of her eyes, the fondness of her smile said, "Good strike, Corain. Are you sure you want this war? You may not be ready for this." The fondness of his said, "Yes, this is the line, Emery. You want crisis right when 2 of your precious projects are coming up, and you can have it." She blinked, slid a glance to the table and back again, the smile tight, the eyes hooded. War, then. A widening of the smile. Or negotiation. "Watch my moves, Corain. You'd make a serious mistake to make this an open breach." "I'll win, Corain. You can stall me off. You can force elections first, damn you. And that will waste more time than waiting on DeFranco." "The matter of the Hope Station appropriations," Bogdanovich said. "First scheduled speaker, Sarah Lau." Sarah. So at this time, I should probably mention that they're going to use as a, it's like a pronoun. It's not a pronoun. It's a like a Mr. or Mrs. An honorific. Thank you. It's an honorific. You have Sir, S-E-R for male, Sarah for female is your broad sir or ma'am equivalent analog. A signal passed between Emery and Lau. Corain could not see Lau's face, only the back of her blonde head, the trademark crown of braids. Doubtless, Lau's expression was perplexed. Emery signaled an aide, spoke into his ear, and that aide's face tightened, mouth gone to a thin line, eyes mirroring dismay. The aide went to one of Lau's aides, and Lau's aide went and whispered in her ear. The move of Lau's shoulders, the deep intake of breath, was readable as her now profiled, frowning face.
Sir President, Catherine Lau said, I move we postpone debate on the Hope Station Bill until Syrah de Franco can take her seat in person. Trade is too profoundly affected by this measure. With all respect to the distinguished gentleman from Fargon, this is a matter that ought to wait.
Seconded, Corain said sharply. A murmur of dismay ran among the aides, heads leaning together, even counselors. Bogdanovich's mouth was open. It took him a moment to react and tap the gavel for decorum.
It has been moved and seconded that debate on the Hope Station Bill be postponed until Syrah de Franco takes her seat in person. Is there discussion?
It was perfunctory, Emery complimenting the proxy, the gentleman from Fargon, agreeing with Lau. Corain made the request for the floor solemnly to concur with Lau. He might have made some light banter. Sometimes they did, expansionists with centrists, with irony under it when matters were settled. This one was not. Emery, damn it, had stolen his fire and his issue, given him what he demanded, and looked straight at him when he had uttered the tedious little courtesy to Denzil Lal and taken his seat. Watch me closely, that look said. That will cost. The vote went round, unanimous. Denzil Lal voting proxy in the vote that took the Hope Appropriations Bill out of his hands.
That concludes the agenda, Bogdanovich said. We had allotted 3 days for debate. The next bill on the calendar is yours, Sarah Emery, number 2405, also budget appropriations for the Bureau of Science. Do you wish to reschedule?
Sir President, I'm ready to proceed, but I certainly wouldn't want to rush a measure through without giving my colleagues adequate time to prepare debate. I would like to move it up to tomorrow if my distinguished colleagues have no objection.
A polite murmuring. No objections. Corain murmured the same.
Sarah Emery, would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Seconded and passed. Motion to adjourn. Seconded and passed. The room erupted into more than the usual disorder. Corain sat still, felt the weight of a hand on his shoulder, and looked up at Mahmoud Chavez's face. Chavez looked relieved and worried at the same time. What happened? That look said, but aloud, that was a surprise.
My office, Corain said. 30 minutes.
Tobias Piestany's 10 says, the picture of the line person is, of course, you, right? Oh, buddy, how did you know? How did that get in there? My God. Gasp. No, it's of a character that's in here. I can't actually recall the scene that's supposed to be from. Offhand? I can make a few guesses. It's not for a while, though. Lunch was a matter of tea and sandwiches couriered in by aides. The meeting had grown beyond the office and filled the conference room. In a fit of paranoia, the military aides had gone over the room for bugs and searched other aides and the scientists for recorders, while Admiral Gorodin sat glumly silent through everything, arms folded. Gorodin had been willing to go along with the walkout. Now things had slid sideways, and the Admiral was glowering, anxious, silent. As it developed, they had cornered Emery on the Hope Corridor budget, and might have an ultimatum on their hands. It's information we're after, Corain said, and took a glass of mineral water from an aide. In front of him, in front of all of them and most of the aides, 800 pages of exposition and figures that constitute the science budget in hard copy with certain items underlined. There were centrists inside the Science Bureau, and there were strong rumors of sleepers in the bill. There always were, and every year no few of them involved Rezun. The damn place doesn't ask for budget itself. The only thing we've got on it is the gross tax returns. And why in hell does Rezun want to get special person status for a 20-year-old chemist on Fargon? Who in hell is Benjamin P. Rubin? Chavez sorted papers on his table, took one that an aide slid under his hand, and gnawed at his lip, following the aide's finger down the paper. "A student," Chavez said. "No special data." "Is there any way it's part of the Hope Project, by any stretch of the imagination?" "It's at Fargon. It's on the route." We could ask... Okay. I don't know who's talking then. Okay, that's Corraine, that's Chavez, that's presumably Corraine, and then Chavez, and then it's Chavez again. Huh. Somebody says it's at Fargon, it's on the route. It could be an aide. "We could ask Emery," Chavez said sourly. "We could ask Emery," Chavez said sourly. "We damn well may have to, on the floor, and take whatever documentation she comes up with." There were dour looks all around. "We're beyond jokes," Gorodin said. Lou, the Secretary of Defense, cleared his throat. "There is a contract we might trust, at least a chain of contacts." "There is a contact we may trust. At least a chain of contacts. Our recent candidate for science." "He's a xenologist," Tien objected, "and a personal friend of Dr. Jordan Warwick of Rezun. Dr. Warwick is here. He came in as part of Councillor Emery's advanced staff. He's asked through Bird for a meeting with certain members of science." When Lou spoke with that much specificity, he was often saying more than he could officially say in so many words. Corraine looked straight at him, and Gorodin was paying full attention. The Admiral had come in from military operations, would go back to military operations, and leave the administrative details of the Bureau of Defense to the Secretary and his staff. It was axiomatic. Counselors might be the experts in their respective fields, but the secretaries ran the apparatus, and the department heads knew who was sleeping with whom. "Bird among them?" "Very likely," Lou said primly, and shut his mouth. Mark that one down, Corraine thought. "Is that an old friendship?" "Is that an old friendship?" Tien asked in a low voice. "About 20 years." "How safe is that for Warwick?" Gorodin asked. "What are we jeopardizing?" "Very little," Lou said. "Certainly not Warwick's friendship with Emery. Warwick himself has his own offices, rarely enters hers, and vice versa. In fact, there's considerable hostility there. He's demanded autonomy inside Rezun. He has it. There are no centrists in Rezun. But Warwick is not an Emery partisan. He's here, in fact, to consult with the Bureau on a transfer." "He's one of the specials," Corraine said, for those not from Cyteen and not, perhaps, entirely aware who Warwick was. A certified genius. A national treasure by law. 40-odd years old, no friend of Emery's. He's had a dozen chances to leave and found his own facilities, and she keeps blocking it in the Bureau. Cut him off at every turn. He had made a personal study of Rezun and Emery. It was only reasonable. But some pieces of information were not as available as others, and Lou's tracing of connections was one of them. Bird can contact him. "Schedules have gone amok," Lou said softly in his scholarly way. "Of course, things have to be rearranged all along the agenda. I'm sure something can be done. Do you want me to mark that down?" "Absolutely. Let's break this up. Get the staffs to working." "That leaves us meeting in the morning," Chen said. "My staff will be here," Corraine said, "very late tonight. If anything comes up that we have to—" He shrugged. If anything comes up of the nature, you understand, something of a need-to-know nature, Walkout was not a word they used openly, and not all the staff present knew that that was in the offing, particularly the clerks. My staff will contact you directly. And quietly, catching Gorodin and Lou as the rest of them drifted out to offices and staff meetings in their own bureaus and departments, "Can you get Warwick?" "Lou?" Gorodin said, and Lou, with a lift of clerkly shoulders, "I should think." Two. He was an ordinary enough man who showed up in the Hall of State conference room wearing a brown casual suit, carrying a briefcase that looked as if it had been sent through baggage once too often. Corraine would not have picked him out of any crowd, a brown-haired, handsome, athletic sort, not looking quite his 46 years. But bodyguards would have attended this man until military police took him under their own wing, and very likely servants had all but dressed him and staffers attended him on ordinary business. By no means would Jordan Warwick have come by commercial carrier or a baggage department gotten its hands on that briefcase. Emery was a special. Special, by the way, is with a capital S. There were 3 at Rezun, the highest number at any single installation. One was this man who devised and debugged psych tape structures, so they said, in his head. Computers ordinarily did that kind of work. When an important enough tape program had to be built or debugged, they gave it to Jordan Warwick's staff, and when a problem was more than any or all of them could handle, it went to Warwick himself. That was as much as Corraine understood. The man was a certified genius and a ward of the state. Like Emery. Like the other dozen special persons. And presumably, if Emery wanted to accord that status to a 20-year-old chemist on Fargon, and, the rumor said, open an office there to attach him to Rezun's staff, and seemed to imply she attached a priority to that project that made it worth something in the scales, right along with her cherished colonial push, there was a damned good reason for it.
Sir Lou,
Warwick said, shaking Lou's offered hand.
Admiral Gorodin, a pleasure.
And a worried look, but an overall friendly one, as he looked toward Corraine and offered his hand.
Counselor, I hadn't expected you.
Corraine's heart did a little skip and race. Danger, it said. Warwick, he reminded himself, was not one of those bright types who operated in some foggy realm of abstract logic completely detached from humanity. He was a psych surgeon. Manipulation was his work, and he was quite in his element, stripping people down to their motives. All this lay behind that sober pleasantness and those younger-than-40 eyes. "You may have guessed," Lou said, "that this is more than I told you it would be." A little alarm registered on Warwick's face.
"Oh?"
he said. Councillor Corraine very much wanted to speak with you, without public attention. This is political, Dr. Warwick. It is quite important. Certainly, if you would rather get on to your other meeting, for which you will otherwise be perhaps 10 minutes late, we will understand that you don't want to involve yourself with our questions, and I hope that you'll accept my personal apologies in that case. It's my profession, you understand, a disposition to intrigue." Warwick drew a breath, distanced himself the few paces to the conference table, and set his briefcase down on it.
"Is this something to do with council? Do you mind explaining what, before I make my decision?"
"It's about the bill coming up, the Science Appropriations Bill." Oh, that could be Corraine, actually. "It's about the bill coming up, the Science Appropriations Bill." Warwick's head lifted just the little bit that said, "Ah." A small smile touched his face. He folded his arms and leaned back against the table, in every evidence a relaxed man.
"What about the bill?"
"What's in it?" Corraine asked. "Really?" The secret smile widened and hardened.
"You mean what's it covering? Or something else?"
Is what it's covering in any way connected to the Hope Project?
No, nothing in that budget to do with it. Nothing I'm aware of. Well, SETI scan, but that's fairly general.
What about the special appointment? Is Rezun interested?
You might say. You want to know about Fargon in general?
I'm interested in whatever you have to say, Dr. Warwick.
I can spare the 10 minutes. I can tell you in less than that what's going on. I can tell you in one word. Psychogenesis. Mind cloning in the popular press.
It was not the answer Corain had expected. It was certainly not what the military expected. Gorodin snorted.
What's it covering? Not a cover, Warwick said, but not the process in the popular press. Not exact duplicates, but duplicate capabilities. Not real significant for, say, a child trying to recover a lost parent, but in the case of, say, a special where the ability is what you want to hang on to. Where the ability is what you want to hang on to, you're familiar with the attempt to recover Bok.
Or Boke, B-O-K is the name. Estelle Bok, the woman whose work led to Faster Than Light. They tried, Corain said. It didn't work.
Her clone was bright, but she wasn't Bok. Bok. She was a better musician than she was a physicist, and desperately unhappy, thanks to all the notoriety. She wouldn't take a reju for days on end till the effects caught up with her, and she'd have to. Wore herself down that way, finally died at 92. Wouldn't even leave her room during the last few years of her life. What we didn't have then was the machinery we have now, and the records. Dr. Emery's work in the war, you know, the studies with learning and body chemistry. The human body has internal regulating systems, the whole complex that regulates sex and growth and defense against infection. In a replication, the genetic code isn't the whole game. Experience impacts the chemical system the genetic code's set up. This is all available in the scientific journals. I could give you the actual references.
You're doing quite well, Corain said. Please.
Say that we know things now that we didn't when we cloned Bok. If the program does what Dr. Emery hopes, we can recover the ability in the same field. It involves genetics, endocrinology, a large array of tests, physiological and psychological, and the records have to be there. I don't know all of it. It's Dr. Emery's project, it's secret, and it's in a different wing. But I do know that it's serious, and it's not extremely far off in the present state of the art. A little speculative, perhaps, but you have to understand, in our science there's a particularly difficult constraint. The scientist himself has to live long enough to draw his conclusions, and Dr. Emery is not young. Every ASI experimentation takes at least 15 years. The Rubin project is going to take at least 20. You see the difficulty. She has to take some small risks.
Health problems? Corain said quietly, recollecting the subtle change in skin tone, the loss of weight. Rejuve lasted an unpredictable number of years. Once it started to lose its effect, problems started, and aging set in with a vengeance. Warwick's eyes left his. He was not going to answer that question frankly. Corain reckoned before he said anything. He had pressed too closely.
Mortality is an increasing concern, Warwick said, for anyone her age in our field. It's what I said, the time the projects take. What's your estimate of this project?
Gorodin asked.
It's very, very important to her. All her theories, understand, all her personal work, her work on endocrine systems and genetics, on psych structures, lead towards this. She's a special. She can requisition them near anything she needs, except the special status that would protect her subject from what happened to Bok. I agree with her on the matter of not using someone inside Rezun. The clone will be at Rezun, but not Rubin. Rubin is young. That's a prerequisite. He's brilliant. He was born on a station, and every move he's ever made, down to buy a drink out of a machine, is there in station records. He was also born with an immune deficiency, and there are extensive medical records that go back to his infancy. That's the most important part. Ari can do it without the Council's approval, but she can't keep Fargon's local government from doing something that might compromise her results. Is Reuben supposed to be aware of this? He'll be aware that he's a blind control on an experiment at Rezun. More significantly, his clone won't know Reuben exists until he's the same age Reuben is now.
Do you think it's a valid project? Corraine asked. Warwick was silent a moment.
I think whether or not one equals the other, the scientific benefits are there.
You have reservations, Lou said.
I see minimal harm to Reuben. He's a scientist. He's capable of understanding what blind control means. I would oppose any meeting of the two at any future date. I'll go on record on that. But I wouldn't oppose the program.
It's not yours.
I have no personal work involved in it.
Your son, Corraine said, does work closely with Dr. Emery.
My son is a student, Warwick said, expressionless, in tape design. Whether or not he'll be involved is up to Dr. Emery. It would be a rare opportunity. Possibly he might apply for the Fargon office if it goes through. I'd like to see that.
Why? Corraine wondered, and wished he dared ask it. But there were limits with a hitherto friendly informant, and there were persistent rumors about Emery that no one proved. Student, Lou said, at Rezun means rather more than student at the university.
Considerably, yes,
Warwick said. All liveliness had left his face. It was guarded now, extremely careful of expressions and reactions. How do you feel about the Hope Project? Corraine asked.
Is that a political question?
It's a political question.
Say that I avoid politics, except as a study.
Warwick looked down and up again, directly at Corraine.
Rezun no longer depends on Azzi trade. Rezun no longer depends on the Azzi trade. We could live quite well off our research, whether colonies go out or not. There'll be a need for what we do, never mind the fate of the other labs, who couldn't undercut us. We have too great a head start on the other fields. We wouldn't be as rich, of course, but we'd do quite well. It's not economics that troubles me. Someday we should talk.
Corraine blinked. That was not what he expected, a feeler from a Rezun scientist. He put his hands in his coat pockets and looked at the others. Can Dr. Warwick miss that meeting, without it leaking? No difficulty, Lou said, and added, if Dr. Warwick wants to miss it. Warwick drew a long breath, then set the briefcase on the floor and pulled a chair back at the conference table.
I'm willing,
he said, and sank into the chair. Corraine sat down. Gorodin and Lou took the chairs at the end. Warwick's face held no expression still.
I know these gentlemen, he said with a slide of the eyes toward the military. I know your reputation, Councillor Corraine. I know you're an honest man. What I'm going to tell you could cost me considerably. I hope you'll use this, only for what it contains, and I hope you won't lay it to personal dislike. Dr. Emery and I have had our differences. You understand, working at Rezun, you have to make a lot of critical decisions. Our material is human. Sometimes the ethics of a situation are without precedent. All we operate on is our best estimation, and sometimes those estimates don't agree. Dr. Emery and I have had more than the average number of confrontations. I've written papers opposing her. We have a conflicting view of certain aspects of her operations, so if she finds out I've been talking to you, she'll believe I've tried to do her damage. But I hope to God you give her this program at Fargon. It doesn't cost the government anything but the special. It doesn't cost the government anything but that special. It creates a dangerous precedent to create a special just to satisfy a research project, just to keep a subject in your reach. I want myself and my son transferred out of Rezun. Corraine stopped breathing a moment. You're a special, the same as she is. I'm not political. I don't have her pull. She'll claim I'm essential under the very terms that make me a special. I'm bound to stay where the government needs me. And so far it arranges to need me at Rezun. Right now my son is working in her program for 2 reasons. First, because it's his field and she's the best. Second, because he's my son and Ari wants a hold on me, and in the politics inside Rezun, there's nothing I can do about that.
I can try again to get myself out of there, and if I'm out from under her direction, I can request my son over to the other project on a personal hardship transfer. That's one reason I'm anxious to see this far-gone facility built. It would be the best thing for the state. It would be the best thing for Rezun. God knows it would be the best thing for Rezun.
Perhaps some things would come out. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not making any charges. I don't want to go public with any of this. I'm saying that Ari has too damn much power, inside Rezun and out. There's no question of her scientific contributions. As a scientist, I have no quarrel with her. I only know the politics inside the house, and politics outside it is the only way I see to get free of a situation that's become increasingly explosive. One had to be careful, very careful. Corraine had not spent 20 years in government to take everything at face value, or to frighten a cooperating witness. So he asked softly, "Excuse me. What do you want, Dr. Warwick?" "I'd like to see that project go through. Then I'm going to transfer. She's going to try to prevent that. I'd like support in my appeal." Sorry, one sec. Oy. My apologies. "I'd like support in my appeal." Warwick cleared his throat. His fingers were locked, white-edged. "The pressure at Rezun is considerable. A move would be everything I want. I'll tell you, I'm not in agreement with this colonization effort. I agree with Berger and Schlegel. There is harm in dispersing humankind to that degree that fast. We've just finished one social calamity. We're not what left Earth. We're not what left Glory's station. We're not going to be what our founders anticipated. And if we make this further push, there's going to be a critical difference between us and our descendants. There's no miracle, no Estelle Boak, no great invention going to close up this gap. That's my view. I can't express that from Rezun. Dr. Warwick, are you telling me your communications are limited there? I'm telling you that there are reasons I cannot express that view there. If you leak this conversation to the press, I'll have to take Rezun's official position. Are you telling me, Dr. Warwick, that transfer is what you're holding out for? The transfer, Counselor. Myself and my son. Then I would have no fear of expressing my opinions. Do you understand me? Most of us in the field that could speak with authority against the Hope Project are in Rezun. Without voices inside science, without papers published, you understand that ideas don't gain currency. Xenology is strongly divided. The most compelling arguments are in our field. You do not have a majority in the 9 electorates, Counselor. It's science itself you have to crack. Ari Emery's own electorate. This psychogenesis project is very dear to her heart, so much her own, in fact, that she doesn't let her aides handle it. It's the time factor again. On the one hand, there's so very little in a lifetime. On the other, a process that involves a human life has so many hiatuses, so many periods when nothing but time will produce the results. Meaning we'll still have to live with her. Meaning we'll still have her to deal with. As long as she lives, definitely, you'll have her in council to deal with. That's why the Fraggoth project is an advantage to both of us. I'd like to take a public position on your side, an opposition from inside Rezun, as it were, particularly from another special, would have considerable credibility in science. But I can't do it now, as things are. The important question, Goradin said, aside from that, is the Rubin project likely to work? Is it real? It's very likely that it will, Admiral. Certainly it's a much more valid effort than the Boak project was. You may know we don't routinely create from the special's gene sets. Even our genetic material is protected by statute. On a practical level, it's the old fine line business. Genius and insanity, you know. It's not total nonsense. When we create ASI, the alpha classes take far more testing and correction, statistically speaking, of course. What went wrong with the Bok clone was what could have gone wrong with Bok, give or take her particular experiences and influences we don't have record of. Our chances of recovering a currently living special are much better. Better records, you understand. Bok came here as a colonist. Her records went with her ship, and it was one of the debuilt ones. Too much was lost, and too much just wasn't recorded. I'm not sure we will ever get Bok's talent back, but it certainly won't be in the present project. On the other hand, recovering, say, Kliegman, who's, pushing a century and a half, would be a real benefit.
Or Emery herself, Corraine said under his breath. God, is that her push? Immortality?
Only so far as any human might want progeny like himself. It's not immortality, certainly no sense of identity. We're talking about mental similarity, two individuals more like each other than identical twins tend to be, and without a dominant twin. Essentially, the recovery of an ability latent in the interface between gene set and what we call tape in an ASI.
Done by tape?
Warwick shook his head. Can't be done with tape, not by present understanding. Corraine thought it through again. And again. Meaning, Gorodin said, that with our lead in genetics and reconstructive psych, we might replicate living specials as well as dead ones. That is a possibility, Warwick said quietly, if certain laws were changed. Practically, I'd speak against that. I understand why they're starting with one, but the potential for psychological trouble is very strong, even if the safeguards keep the two from meeting. Even dead ones, if I were such a subject, I'd worry about my son, and that individual who would not, in any meaningful sense, be his brother or his father. You see, it's very complicated when you're dealing with human lives. The Nine took a strong interest in the Bok case. Too strong. In this much I agree with Dr. Emery. Only the Bureau of Science, in specific, only Rezun ought to have any contact with the two subjects. That's what she wants on Fargon. We're not talking about an office or a lab. We're talking about an enclave, a community Reuben will not leave except as I leave Rezun, rarely and with escorts for his protection. My God, Gorodin said, Fargon will veto it. A separate orbiting facility. That's what she's had to promise Harogo. A compartmentalized area. Rezun will pay the construction. You know, then, what deals she's made. I happen to know that one. There may be others. That's a fat contract for certain construction companies at Fargon.
It rang true, all the way down. Corraine gnawed his lip. Let me ask you a difficult question, Corraine said. If there were other information,
I would give it.
If there were other information yet to come, you're asking me to be an informant. A man of conscience. You know my principles. I know yours. It seems there's a great deal in common. Does Rezun own your conscience?
Even the Admiral hasn't been able to requisition me. I'm a ward of the state. My residencies here have to be approved by the Union government. That's the price of being a special. The Admiral will tell you. Rezun will call me essential. That's an automatic 5 votes of the 9. That means I stay in Rezun. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Counselor. I'm going to slip Admiral Gorodin a request for transfer just as soon as that special status is vetoed for Reuben, before the appropriations vote for the Hope Station project. Officially, that's when it will happen.
God, you think you're worth a deal like that?
Counselor, you can't win the Hope Station vote. DeFranco is in Ari's pocket, or her bank book via Hayes Industries. The arrangement is DeFranco's going to try to abstain, which at least is going to show a little backbone for her constituency. Forget you heard that from me. But if you don't throw the vote into a tie and send the business into the General Council, it's inevitable. You buy me and my son out of Rezun, Counselor, and I'll start talking. I'll be worth far more outside her direct surveillance in the Rezun facility on Fargon. She might get Hope Station, but she can be stopped, Counselor. If you want a voice inside science, I can be that. It was a moment before Corain felt in command of his breathing. He looked at Lou, at Gorodin, suddenly trying to remember how Lou had maneuvered him into this meeting, suspecting these two dark eminences among the 9 who played behind a screen of secrecies. "You should go into politics," he said to Warwick then, and suddenly remembered to his disturbance who he was talking to. That this was a Rezun psych master, and that this mind was one of those 12 Union considered too precious. And that this mind was one of those 12 Union considered too precious to lose. Psych is my field. Psych is my field, Warwick said, with a disturbing directness to his gaze, which no longer seemed ordinary, or harmless, or average. I only want to assure you it never leaves us at Rezun. Oh my gosh. How did I do that? I skipped a line. I only want to practice it without harassment. I'm fully aware of politics, Counselor. I assure you it never leaves us at Rezun, nor we it. Help me and I'll help you. It's that simple. It's not simple, Corain objected, but to Warwick it was. Whoever had drawn him into this meeting, be it Lou, be it Gorodin, be it Warwick, he was not sure, suddenly, that it was not Emery. A man could grow insane dealing with the potential in the specials, especially those specials who dealt with perception itself. One had to trust someone sometime, or nothing got done.
The first bill on the agenda is number 2405 for the Bureau of Science. Ariane Emery, sole sponsor, regarding the regular appropriations for the Bureau of Science under the provisions of Union Statute 2595, Section 2.
Emery looked Corain's way. Well, that half-lidded stare said, will you defy me over something so routine? Corain smiled, and let the bitch worry. The gavel hammered down, again early.
We are in recess,
Bogdanovich said. The murmuring in the council chamber was subdued. Ariane Emery drew a whole breath, finally. The first stage was past. Reuben had his status, barring a veto from the Council of Worlds, and there would be none. Corain might orchestrate a double cross, but he would save it for something important. Something Corain considered important. The Hope Station project could serve as a decoy until then. DeFranco might want to abstain, but she would not when the heat came on. Aides surged doorward, accompanying their counselors. The press was, thank God, held downstairs, away from the chamber as long as there was no adjournment. A 2-hour lunch and consideration of the dispensation of the rest of the science permissions afterward, a tedious long list of permissions which, in the way of a good many things in a government which had started small and cozy and grown into an administrative monster within a single lifespan, the Executive 9 were supposed to clear, but which in fact had devolved to the secretarial level and which had become routine approval. Still, she would not breathe easy until that clearance was given, until the obfuscated facts of permission to use a gene set from a living special went through in the list of Rezun projects that required routine permissions. There had been, each year, an attempt to cancel the whole science permissions grant from the floor of General Council. Every year the abolitionists or some other lunatic group got up a proposal to outlaw ASI and to outlaw human experimentation. Every year the Council of Worlds sensibly voted it down. But there was that lunatic element, which the centrists could, in some attempt to exert leverage against the Hope Project, use against the science bill. If the fringes and the centrists did combine on an issue in that body, it came dangerously close to a plurality against the expansionist party. She was worried. She had worried ever since her informers told her that the centrists were talking walkout. Corain's sudden willingness to deal bothered her. And if it would not have raised the issue of an unseemly haste, she would gladly have urged the chair to put the science bill up before noon. As it was, obstacles were falling too fast, things were going too well, everything was sliding on oil. What had looked to be a lengthy session would end in a record 3 days, sending the 9 back to their civilian lives for at least another 6 months. It had been intended as a means to speed up government, that the 9 would meet and pass all measures that impacted their various spheres of interest, then leave the staff of the bureaus and the elected representatives of the Council of Worlds and the various senates and councils to handle the routine and the ordinary administrative detail. In fact, the 9, being top professionals, were very efficient. They met briefly, did their job, and went away again to be what they were. But some of them exerted an enormous control over the bureaus they oversaw, wielding power that the framers of the Constitution had not entirely foreseen, no more than they had foreseen Raziun's work in the war, or the fact that population would become what it was, or the defection of Pell from both Sol and Union, and the developments that had entrained. The Bureau of State had been conceived as carefully controlled by professionals in diplomatic service, but distances pushed it into greater and greater dependency on the Defense Bureau's accurate reporting of situations it was not there to see. The Bureau of Science, considering the discovery of alien life at more than Pell's star, had to take on diplomatic functions and train potential contact specialists. The Bureau of Citizens had become a disproportionately large electorate, and it had elected an able and dangerous man, a man who had still the sense to know when he was trapped. Possibly Corraine did not know that DeFranco was solidly hers. That would explain his willingness to risk his political life on a walkout. Surely he did not think he had any hope of swinging the Pan-Paris trade loop, which Lao dominated. He could do nothing but cost the government money, with which other interests would not be patient. It was certainly not likely that he would create any objection on the science bill. Surely. Dr. Emery. Despite her aides and her bodyguards, a touch reached her arm, and Catelyn was there too, instantly, her body tense and her expression baffled, because the one who had touched her was no one's aide. It was Admiral Gorodin himself who had just brushed by Catelyn's defense. "A word with you." "I'm on a tight schedule." She had no desire to talk to this man who, already with an enormous share of the budget at his disposal, with sybaritic waste in his own department, argued with her about the diversion of 10 ships to the Hope Project, and sided with Corraine. She had other contacts inside defense, and used them. A good section of intelligence and most of special services was on her side, and a new election inside the military might unseat both Gorodin and Lou. Let Corraine consider that if he wanted a fight. "I'll walk with you," Gorodin said, refusing to be shaken, his aides mingling with hers. "One moment," Catelyn said. "Sir." Florian had moved in. They were not armed. The military were. But it did not prevent them. They were Azzy, and they answered to her, not to logic. "It's all right," Ariane said, lifting a hand in a signal that confirmed what she said. "An inside source tells me," Gorodin began, "you've got the votes on the Hope Project." Damn! Her heart raced, but aloud, with a stolid calm, "Well, then, your source might be right, but I don't take it for granted." "Corraine's upset. He's going to lose face with this." "What in hell is he up to?" "You know we can stall this off," Gorodin said. "Likely you can. It won't win you anything, if you're right." "We have a source on DeFranco's staff, Dr. Emery. We are right. We also have a source inside Andrew's company and inside Hayes Industries. Damn good stock buy. Are they finally going to get that deep space construction?" "My God." Gorodin lifted a brow. You know Hayes has defense contracts." "I don't know what you're getting to, but I don't like to talk finance anywhere near the word vote. And if you've got a recorder about your person, I take strong exception to it." as I would to yours, Sarah. But we're not talking finance. As it happens, I set my people to talking to people in Hayes when we heard that. And we know very well that the Resume extension is connected to the Rubin bill. And when my staff spent last night investigating the Resume charter, a very helpful young aide came up with a sleeper in the articles that gave Resume the unique right to declare any subsidiary facilities part of its administrative territory. That means what you're going to build at Fargon won't be under Fargon control. It's going to be under yours, an independent part of Union, and Reuben has something to do with it.
This is more than he could come up with on his own. Damn, but it is. Someone spilled something and he keeps naming Hayes and Andros. That's who I'm supposed to blame. This is all very elaborate, she muttered. They had reached the intersection of the balcony and the hall to the council offices, where she wanted to go. She stopped and faced the Admiral. Go on.
We find this of military interest. A Resume facility at Fargon poses security risks.
For a moment, everything stopped. It was not from the direction she had expected. It was not sane. It was, if one was worried about merchanter contacts. We're not talking about labs, Admiral.
What are we talking about?
Reuben's going to be working there. Mostly it'll be his lab.
You have enormous faith in this young man.
Trap. My God, where is it? He's a very valuable young man.
I'd like to discuss the security aspects of this before the vote this afternoon. Can we talk?
Damn it, I've got a luncheon appointment.
Dr. Emery, I honestly don't want to send this to committee. I'm trying to be cooperative, but I feel this is going through much too fast. I have other concerns that I don't think you want me to mention here.
Someone's talked. He's gotten to someone. But aloud, to Florian, tell Yanni I'm caught in a crisis. Tell him to sit in for me. I'll get there when I can. She looked at the Admiral, calmer, reckoning that it sounded like bargaining, not a torpedo from the flank. Your place or mine?
Thank you. Oh, he said that.
What? Did I miss a page? Oh, it's like there was a page break or something. Yeah, the page shifts and it's like there was a space gap, whatever they call those. Your place or mine? Because of the page break, it didn't show up. Usually they'd put like 3 asterisks at the bottom of the page. This does not have that for reasons beyond my ken. Thank you, Ariane said, taking the coffee from Florian, who knew how she liked it. It was her office, her conference room, and her bodyguards present, the military aides staying outside, the Admiral's own offer. Conciliation, perhaps. The Admiral took his coffee black. Most did, who got a taste of it on special occasions. It was rare and real, imported all the way from Sol, Earth's southern hemisphere. It was one of Ariane's cultivated vices, and she took hers white. Real milk. A second extravagance. AG is still working on this, she said. Someday. Cyteen had been a silicate-polluted hell when they started agriculture in the low-lying valleys, where domes and the precipitators could create a mini-climate. Another small flash. So much brown, so much blue-green on the hills. The lines spun above the valley like a webfly's work. The big mirrors caught light from space and flung power down from the hills. And the weather-makers in orbit raked the land with storms, terrible storms. We're safe, Ari, Maman would say. It's only noise. It's weather, that's all. Leonid Gorodin sipped his coffee with a tranquil look, and smiled, and said, The rumor inside the Bureau is that this Rubin project is yours, personally. There's nothing you do that doesn't change the balance between us and Alliance, us and Sol. I've talked to Lou. We have a lot of anxiety about this. We manage our own security. We've always managed it. Tell me this, Dr. Emery. Is the project you're undertaking going to have any strategic significance? Trap. Admiral, I suspect the development of a new toilet seat has strategic significance with some of your advisors.
Gorodin chuckled politely and waited.
That's fine, she said calmly. We'll appreciate a vote of support from your bureau. You want us to move the facility, we'll move it, even to Cyteen Station. We're very accommodating. We just don't want to lose Reuben.
That important?
That important.
I'll make a proposition to you, Dr. Emery. You've got an agenda. You want it passed. You want these things to go through. You want them to go through with a clean bill from finance. You certainly don't want any long delays. You want to get back to Rezun. I want to get back to my command. I've got business out there, and between you and me, I'm allergic as hell to something around here, and I hate the socializing.
I'm also anxious to get home, she said.
It was a dance. It would get where it was going in Gorodin's own time. You level with me, Gorodin said, about the Fargon project.
Say it's genetics. It's experimental.
Are you going to have advanced labs out there?
No, medical wing, analysis, administrative work, none of the classified equipment.
Meaning you're following up, not creating.
In practical terms, yes. No birth lab.
Gorodin looked at the empty cup and at the two Azzi, and held his out.
Florian,
Ariane said, and the Azzi, with a quiet nod, took the pot from the sideboard and filled it. Gorodin followed Florian's moves with his eyes, thoughts proceeding.
You can rely on their discretion, Ariane said. It's quite all right. They're not sensitive to discussion. Rezun's best work. Aren't you, Florian?
Yes, Sarah, Florian said, preparing her second cup. He offered it.
Beauty and brains,
Ariane said, and smiled with the mouth, not the eyes.
Alliance won't develop birth labs. They have no worlds to fill.
Yet. We have to think about that. Who's going to manage that facility at Fargon?
Yanni Schwartz.
Gorodin frowned and sipped slowly at the incongruously tiny cup.
Ah, Ariane thought. Now, we get closer to it.
I'll tell you, Dr. Emery, a lot of my people rely on the psych hospital at Viking. For reasons which are only politics, I'd like to have a facility a lot closer to that Hope Station route you're promoting. I'd like to have a place to send some of my worst cases, where Cyteen won't take them through the station facility.
Any particular reason for that?
We're talking about special operations, people whose IDs change, people whose faces, you understand, I don't want seen. These are people who live anxious lives. They feel exposed at the big stations. They'd feel a hell of a lot better if there were a way to get to a Rezun facility, not on Cyteen. Ariane frowned, not bothering to hide her perplexity. It sounded halfway sane. What I want, Gorodin said, is access. A facility where my people feel safe. Where I know they are. I want to throw some of the covert budget in there. Some of my staff.
No military.
We're talking about unanimous support for that facility. I can deliver that.
No military. Rezun staff. And it better be a damn large contribution. You'll force a redesign. I'm not having my project compromised by your people strolling through Rezun boundaries. There'll be a total separation between any military hospital and our offices.
We can go with that. We can go with that, but we want a liaison between our side and yours that we have confidence in. Someone we've worked with. The thought hit like ice water. It was hard not to react, to keep the fingers relaxed on the fragile handle of the cup.
Who did you have in mind?
Dr. Warwick. He designed the training tapes. We want him, Dr. Emery.
Does he want you?
Calmly. Very calmly. We can ask him.
I think I know your source, Admiral. I'm damned sure I know your source. What else did he tell you?
I think you're jumping to conclusions.
No, I'm not. I was afraid of something like this. You want him, do you? You want a man in charge of your highest security operations who quite readily betrayed my interests.
I've told you my sources.
Of course you have. You're quite willing to have some Hayes employee's head on the block, some poor sod of an engineer, no doubt, that they'll find a way to blame if I come down on them. You want Jordan Warwick. Did he tell you why?
He didn't tell me anything.
Admiral, you're a damn good poker player, but remember how I make my living. Remember how he makes his. What's he done? Offered to go public with his opinions. Is that how you'll guarantee me Corraine?
Dr. Emery, you know I can deliver what I promise.
Of course you can. And Jordan Warwick promises you my head on a platter. He promises you he can swing votes in science. I'll tell you what I'll do. You can have him. I'll transfer him and his whole damned staff. If you want to put him over a top-secret facility, go right ahead. If he wants to make speeches and write papers against my policies, fine. She set the cup down. Do we have a deal, Admiral? We can get out of this damned city days early, if that's the case. You support me in a request to let us leave sealed ballots on the Hope Bill, and if you can guarantee they'll be unanimous, none of us will have to show up here to call a question. Deal?
I think we can go with that.
She smiled. Excellent. If you want Warwick's wing at Fargon, that'll have to be written up. I'll trust your staff for that. Mine's busy, but it'll wait on the establishment of a secure facility, and I do trust you know how to lay your hands on Warwick to get his signature on the request.
Goradin swallowed his coffee in some haste and set his cup down. Thank you, Dr. Emery. I'm sure this will work to everyone's good. He rose and offered his hand. Ariane rose and reciprocated a strong handshake, and smiled at him all the way to the door. The Azzy Catelyn closed it then, her face as blank as any soldier at attention. Florian picked up the cups, trying not to look at her either. They knew when to be afraid. And that, unfortunately, is where I have to call it for today. We will continue reading the day after tomorrow, is the plan. So, there was a lot to absorb there. And I'm not sure how much to talk about it. Not much, I think. Much of this winds up being revealed later or explained in some ways, at least important things. Certain aspects of the politicking are not important. She's given you a basic structure for how their government's set up, and that's kind of the most of it. This will be passively reinforced over time occasionally, and further expounded upon. But yes, it is about subterfuge, paranoia, and spookdom. There is much spookery that occurs here. It's a very Cold War spy flick in the halls of, say, in the halls of government, or the halls of a particular kind of body, kind of vibe. Set in a science fictional universe. It's really good. We are going to go some pretty interesting places with this. And I hope people enjoy the ride. I know I've enjoyed it several times before. I hope other people do too. Alrighty, with that I'm going to dip. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Sorry about the late start. As always, stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and I'll see you all the day after tomorrow. Oh, right! And the playlists are updated as of now. I have updated them, or as of a day or two ago, so Distress is now in its own playlist. Alrighty. With that, I leave you all. That picture of Grant is incredibly distracting. Okay. I might have to remove that one. Stupid, sexy Grant. God damn! He just a whole meal. He just a lunch. Anyway, yeah, I'll leave you all to it. Hopefully people enjoy. I know I do. Toodaloo! Until